In this video, I do 3 demonstrations using Ampersand's new Duoframe. They call it the Duoframe because there's 2 ways to use it. The first way is a lot like a traditional frame where you place the artwork in the back and it's held in place by points. The second way is when you can glue a panel to the front of the frame using silicone. In this video, I'll demonstrate both ways of framing your artwork using this frame. This is the 5x7 Duoframe. It lists all the sizes on the packaging. This will fit up to 11 by 13 if you do a float mount, but for this one, I'm just doing a window mount. So all the hardware is included and it's inside this box. A few points about these frames in general. The frame size is actually the size of this window. So this is a 5x7 frame. This measures 5x7, but the outside dimension is much larger. This painting is on an 1/8 inch thick Gessobord. These frames will also accommodate cradled panels that are 7/8 of an inch thick. Anything thicker than that though might not actually work in here. That's about 1 1/8 inches deep. If you paint on cradled Gessobords that are 1.5 inches thick, it wouldn't fit in here. It would stick out by almost 1/2 inch. In that case, you'd want to use a regular floater frame because those are available with a depth of 1.5 inches. For the window mount, all you have to do is buy the frame that's the exact size of your painting. So this is a 5x7 painting, and this is a 5x7 Duoframe. It attaches from the back, and what you use are points to hold that in place. You turn the frame over, and you want to work on a surface that's clean and smooth. Each frame comes with 16 points, so you can use 4 per side. You want to push them into the frame with this pointed end going into the wood, and the flat side facing down. The instructions say to put 4 points per side, but this is so small, I think maybe I'll do 3 on this side and maybe 2 on this side. You can use a screwdriver or a putty knife to drive that in there. And you want to hold it from this side. You don't want to put your hand here because if you slip, you might hit your hand. So you just use a little bit of elbow grease and push it in there. A screwdriver really isn't the best tool for driving points. You can buy a point driving tool. Fletcher makes one called PushMate, and it's designed specifically for these points. So let's open this up and see how it works. It includes a container of extra points. This tool has like this notch in here, so that fits in there pretty good and it won't slide sideways. So that's nice and secure in the frame. The only thing left to do is to put the hardware on the back. In the hardware, there should be 2 D-ring hangers, which are these 2 pieces right here, and 2 screws to secure them to the frame. The instructions say to make marks about 1/3 of the way down from the top. This frame's about 12 inches high, so I'll make a mark about 4 inches. And it says 1/4 inch from the side. I'll do the same thing on the other side. They say not to use a drill with a Phillips head because you might split the wood, so I'll hand drive them into the frame. It's also not necessary to drill pilot holes. If you do want to drill pilot holes, I have a tip in the next section that you might find useful. There's more than enough picture hanging wire in here. You'll want to cut maybe an extra foot, so right about here. You can use scissors, but I'd rather use wire cutters. And these vice grips have wire cutters towards the end here. If I insert that in there and then close it, it cuts it. The instructions show the simplest way to tie a knot. Loop it through a second time, tighten it up, then you just wrap the wire around itself. You can bunch it down like this to make it neater. You could cut it off right there, but I usually just take the excess and loosely wrap it around here, and that should hold. Here's another simple variation. You just loop it through, then you wrap it underneath the wire, and then loop it through again. And that creates like a loop that wraps around itself. And then you just wrap it around itself maybe 5 or 6 times and bunch it up to clean it up. That was a little too long, so I cut it off. And that should hold pretty good. In the next section, I'll show you how to tie the improved clinch knot, which I use for heavy duty applications. The last step is to attach these rubber bumpers. You just stick them on the bottom corners. And that's it, it's ready to hang. Removing a painting is pretty simple. You can just use a screwdriver to pry out these points. When you removed all the points, you can just pop out the painting and put in a new one. You can reuse the points as long as they're not damaged. So there's the new painting in my frame. It didn't take much time at all. You can fit a 5x7 in this frame, but you can also have larger paintings if you use the float mount method, which I'll demonstrate later in this video. But just to get an idea, this is an 8x10 within the same frame. You can go up to 11 by 13, which would give you a smaller gap around the outside. So there's plenty of options here. This should be obvious, but if you're going to do a float mount like this, the painting has to be larger than this opening. For example, this painting of koi fish is too small. It would just drop through this opening. There's nothing to hold it up. Duo frames are available in black and white. So here's a black one. The window mount can fit an 8x8, and the float mount can fit up to a 14x14 square. This time I figured I would frame the 7/8 inch thick cradled Gessobord and also use the point driver instead of the manual one. We'll see how that works. To open this up, you just lift up these flaps and it should slide right off. Turn this over and then place the painting inside of it. This Gessobord is 7/8 of an inch thick. You can see that there's still enough room to drive a point into the side of the frame to hold it in place. If you want any thicker, you wouldn't be able to do that, and it would stick out too far from the frame, which would look kind of weird because it would make it protrude from the wall a bit. This is the dual drive Elite point driver from Logan. It comes with two different types of points. I like the flexible ones which have the black paint on them, and those are really convenient, and I'll show you why later. To insert them into the point driver, you pull this lever back and this pops up. You want the points so that the sharp end is pointing outwards. You drop it in here, you want to get it into, there's like a channel in there, and then you slide it down so it's at the bottom. And then you got to press this down so it snaps into place. On the back, you can make adjustments for how far the points will drive into the wood. If you turn it clockwise, the points will go further into the wood. If you go counterclockwise, it doesn't go as far into the wood. I only recommend using this point driver on frames that are 8 inches or larger. Otherwise, it might not fit in there unless you tilt it, which would drive the points in at an angle. I don't think that would hold as well, so I don't recommend it. Before you begin, you want to make sure you put your safety glasses on. The directions say 4 points per side, but I think we can get away with 3. So I'll start in the middle, and then I'll do 1 on each end. The last step is to attach the wire and bumper pads. It's not necessary to drill pilot holes, but if you do decide to pre-drill holes for the screws, I would recommend using a manual drill like this. It's easier to control and you're less likely to drill too deep. Here's how I tie the improved clinch knot. All I do is I loop it through the D-ring, then wrap this wire around itself maybe 5 or 6 times. You could tighten that up by pushing it towards the loop. You stick the end of this wire through the loop, like so, and that forms this big loop, and you want to stick the end through there again. And what that does is that it clinches on itself as you tighten it. You can clean that up by taking a pair of pliers and bunching it up, and then pull on the end. Any excess wire, you can just wrap around the wire itself. I have a whole video on how to tie this knot, and I also give some tips on hanging pictures. The last step is to attach these rubber bumpers to the back of the frame. And there's the finished frame painting, like how the avocado's looking there. The benefit of using these flexible points is that you can bend them back to remove the painting. So once they're all bent back, you can remove the painting and then place a new one in there and just fold them back down. I like how easy it is to change a painting out of a frame this way. That way you can reuse frames for exhibits and art festivals. This is the largest Duoframe. It has a window that's 12 by 12 inches. Here's a 12 by 12 inch, 7/8 of an inch thick canvas. Here's what it looks like as a window mount. But you can also use this frame with larger panels. Here's a 16-inch canvas panel, and you can mount it to the front of the frame by using silicone adhesive. This panel is 1/8 of an inch thick, and I made it from an Ampersand Gessobord. I'll be releasing a video soon on how I make canvas panels. It is possible to mount a thicker panel to one of these frames, but you lose out on the protective benefit of having an edge that's a little bit higher than the canvas. If you rest a ruler on here, you'll see that there's a little bit of a space between the ruler and the canvas. The fact that these edges are a little bit higher than the canvas means that it will protect it from damage. Let's say someone puts his face down on a table and slides it around. It will be the frame that takes the abuse and not the painting. So you can mount thicker panels to it, but you have to keep in mind that you lose the protective benefit of having a raised edge. You might be wondering how you go about centering this when you glue it down. One trick that I use is that I'll slide it over to the edge and measure the space on the right side. So that measures 2¼ inches. All you have to do is divide that in half. So what you need around the outside is 1 1/8 inches. I marked off 1 1/8 inches on this tape measure so it's easier to see. 100% silicone adhesive is recommended. This is the tube that I picked up. You can get it at a hardware store or on Amazon. It's the GE Advanced Silicone. The directions on the back say the sealant should be tooled within 5 to 10 minutes after application. So you have about 5 to 10 minutes to center it. And then it says, allow at least 24 hours before exposing sealant to water. So it needs 24 hours to dry. There are other adhesive options depending on the weight of the artwork and how permanent you need it to be. You have to cut the nozzle off the top of this. It says a dot of silicone every inch or 1.5 inches. So I'll start in the corners, then the middle, then I'll just keep dividing it. So I'll do that for the other 3 sides, and then I'll put the painting on top of it. I have my dots of silicone around the perimeter of this edge. Now it's time to put the painting on top. I'll eyeball this and then I'll measure to get it right. It has to go up slightly. Same with this side. And then apply some pressure to make sure it's in full contact with the glue. That looks pretty even. I'll let it dry overnight. I let that dry for 24 hours and it's nice and secure in the frame. You don't ever want to pick it up by the painting, you want to pick it up by the frame. But just to demonstrate how strong the silicone is, the silicone holds really well. You might be interested in my video about how to frame canvas panels. I also have a video on how to tie picture hanging wire, which includes tips on how to hang paintings.